Great experiences build great leaders. Great leaders build great teams. This is Building Great Sales Teams.
All right, guys, welcome back to Building Great Sales Teams. I got a good one for you guys today. I have been following this man for about a year. I've had several connection calls with him, and we just geeked out on all things sales management and talent acquisition. So I wanted to bring him on the show so you guys could experience a little bit of his genius. I have with me today Brian Alexander. He's a sales management consultant, as well as he's got a talent optimization company called Expressing the Genius Within, and they use predictive index to hire the right talent for the right seat. So naturally, I had to have him on the show. Brian, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. That intro has me fired up.
Awesome, man. You know, we get that a lot around here. We've invested in it, you know what I mean? As all things, when you have intention with it, you know what I mean? You typically get a good response from it, right?
Right. I like it.
So I was cyber stalking you earlier, and I noticed that you had a post about homeschooling. So do you and your family, do y'all homeschool?
We do. I have a 8-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old daughter, turning 5 actually in April. Mm-hmm. And we've homeschooled from the beginning, just kind of set out to do it. And fortunately enough, have built a life to be able to support that. My wife is full-time homeschooling mom and CEO of the household. So, we have our roles carved out for us, and we're happy. I'm not going to say it's the easiest thing to do, but it's the most rewarding for sure.
I love it. And I love it because, my wife was a teacher for a long time. And I don't know if you know this, but just 4 months ago, she started her own homeschool tutoring service.
Okay.
So she has a brick and mortar location. And if students are struggling in a particular area, they'll bring them into her brick and mortar location, and then she'll tutor them. And, she's got her master's in math instruction and curriculum. And so that's her zone of genius, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
It's been going really well. She paid herself for the first time this month. So that was pretty cool to see her go from 4 months ago, not even having a location, to I think she's got 12 clients right now, roughly. And they're on, weekly tutoring schedules. And she's building a little homeschool community, within her group. And she has these events for holidays and stuff like that for them to get out of the house and just come hang out and play and all that good stuff. So it's been interesting seeing, that dynamic, because our kids have always been in public school, and because she was the teacher at the school. So naturally they went wherever she went, and then she got to spend time with them every day in between breaks and lunch and recess and whatever. And so, but now, she started her own business doing that.
That's amazing. There's going to be a huge demand for that within the next 5 years or so. I think more and more parents are re-evaluating who they're allowing to raise their children, and let's face it, your children are being indoctrinated by somebody.
Yeah,
values are being instilled, and it's if they're away from the parents for 8 hours a day, you better pray to God that you have great teachers. But even if your teachers are great, you kind of have the blind leading the blind in terms of the peers, the children raising the children. And I choose to, I think, take the harder path and let's homeschool the girls, build the values we want, teach them what we feel is going to be useful and necessary. And but just like business coaches, we use a ton of different co-ops, and people are always like, how are you going to socialize your children? I'm like, they're not dogs. Like dogs, it's there's plenty of things to do. There's more and more homeschooling co-ops, more people to be resources. That's another objection we get is you never went to school to become a teacher. What makes you think you're equipped to be able to do that? And I'm like, well, nobody cares about my children more than me and my wife. And
right.
Two, I'm resourceful. I'm going to find people who can help me, and I'm gonna facilitate their education, but I'm not the one necessarily doing all the work, right?
Right. Not necessarily writing the curriculum. You're just executing the curriculum. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah. And there is a ton of resources. My wife's been to the, the conferences that they have, and, she's now in that community. She's in the Facebook groups, and they're all using different resources that are built for homeschool or built in the classroom and adapted to homeschool. And so, it's like everything else. Like you can dive into it and learn it. And like you said, like your wife's dedicated to it. You know what I'm saying? Like that's her full-time job right now, is to educate and to care for the kids during the day. And so nobody's going to be better at that job. You know what I'm saying? And nobody's gonna be more willing to say, hey, I need help. You know what I mean? Because she doesn't want to sacrifice her kids' education, So like if she does, then she's gonna reach out for those resources, those groups, those co-ops, No, I couldn't agree more. And that's one of the things I've realized too about the socialization piece. Like living out in the country now, our kids are making friends with, these kids that have lived out there their whole life. And, there's acres between houses. So it's not like you can just go knock on your friend's door, without going through a field or down a very sketchy country road, So we don't just let our kids like ride around the neighborhood, right? Because there's loose dogs. Like there's also issues with, human trafficking and stuff like that.
Right.
And, that happens out there in the country. So it's like, it's more of a planned thing, So when you think about it, like, and so we meet these kids and they're like, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. They have great manners and everything. And I'm like, it's because they're constantly exposed to their parents and not their friends. You know what I'm saying? Their parents are instilling that in them and making that effort. And then, they are part of traditional homes where, dad's going out working, making the bacon, and then mom's staying home with the kids. And so even if they're not in public school, they're getting that education, that indoctrination. And they're way more well-behaved than my kids in terms of manners and in terms of, how they treat others, And so I have to work harder because I'm working against the public school system, or I'm working against their friends and them teaching them, different stuff. And so like, it's a challenge for sure, and I know that's not necessarily what this show is about, but, we're all about leadership, and leadership starts in the home, right? So
that's right.
I don't want to get too far off track here. So
but you're right. We are leaders. I don't care if you're a CEO or a parent or a friend or a brother or a dad. We're either leading ourselves or leading other people, and you have to be able to lead yourself to be able to lead other people.
100%. So speaking of being leaders, you lead a sales team right now. Can you kind of walk us through what the setup is? Is it all virtual? And how you got into that role that you have right now?
Yeah, so I owned a couple micro gyms, for about a decade, and I did business coaching for other micro gyms for about 5 years, toward the tail end of the 10 years of owning gyms, and I liked it a lot. I loved helping gym owners. Gym owners are terrible business people. They clear a lot, and they got into the business of owning a gym because they wanted to change lives, but nobody has ever taught them anything about business. So we were there to teach them systems, processes, a framework to follow for their business. So they didn't have a job. They actually had, an asset or a business to be proud of. So did that for a while, and we kept running into kind of the same problems of, we would have issues with some of the systems that we were teaching, and they would have issues. And it ended up being that, I fell in love with the people part. So the systems and processes had to happen, but the people part of it was really what intrigued me, like putting the right people into the right seats to thrive. And that kind of is going to bleed into the consulting company that I started outside of sales management, but it kind of all blends together. I ended up selling my gym in January of 2020, right before the madness. I stopped doing business coaching, and I kind of.
Did you know something we didn't know?
No,
like 2 months later, the shit hit the fan.
I was due. I had a string of bad decisions, and that was one of the best decisions of my life.
Awesome.
I was due. Let's just put it that way. But so, I sold the gym. I stopped doing the business consulting for the gyms. I wanted to kind of play in a bigger pond. And I started my own consulting company for talent optimization, helping companies hire and put the right people into the right seats using behavioral data, scientifically validated behavioral assessments. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and this is where it bleeds back into building a sales team. Yeah. He was like, "What are you going to do? Like you just sold the gym, longtime friend. And, you just sold the gym." I'm like, "Look, we made money selling the gym. I don't have to do anything right now. I have no idea what I want to do. I know I'm going to build my own company, and that takes a lot of effort, energy, and hard work." And he's like, "Well, why don't you start with, helping my company?" And he told me finally what he did. He had told me before, but I never really paid attention to him. Yeah. He's like, "Look, I work for this laser company. We're in dentistry. We're kind of like the LASIK for gum surgery. And we basically kind of help people with all of the same health problems that you helped in the gym, but from like a gum disease standpoint." And I'm like, "Okay, whatever." And he's like, "Well, why don't you help me with your assessments? Because I know they're looking at hiring. Why don't you help me with that kind of stuff? And we can see if, there's a fit where I can help you get into this company and do that." And the more we kind of talked, he's like, "Really, there's an opening in New York. I think actually, the more I talk to you, the more I think you'd be really good at this. And it's entrepreneurial." And he, sputtered off all the benefits. He took 2 months out of the year sabbatical. I love, kind of a work-life balance at that point, especially after being an entrepreneur and, not really having much of it. And, I just ended up saying, shoot, I started right before the lockdowns. I started right during COVID. I'm like, you know what, I'll give it a shot. And COVID happened. The whole business model changed. The whole world changed. Did a lot of virtual appointments. I was drinking from a fire hose, kind of learning dentistry and laser physics. The benefit, though, was because we went virtual, the volume of calls and webinars that we hosted and presentations that we did virtually was like 10 times the normal amount. Yeah. So I was able to kind of learn at a very fast clip because of the volume that I was exposed to. And after the first year, we did really well, crushed it. And our director's like, "Look, I want to build out a sales team. Why don't you look for people that might be good at this?" And immediately, like, "Look, gym owners, we got gym owners. They're entrepreneurial. They have their personal systems nailed in. They're hard workers. They have the entrepreneurial grit. And I use these behavioral assessments. I can help you find more of people like me." So I kind of married those two things and then took my experience with coaching gym owners, and I called kind of my top gym owners in different regions. I'm like, "Look, some of them,
all their businesses were doing this right now."
Yeah, they were all, exactly. And gym ownership is exhausting to begin with. It's a lot of emotional energy and bandwidth, in addition to time, because you have personal relationships with your 10 coaches, 300 members. So, I was able to kind of talk to a lot of them. I got 7, I built a team of 7 or 8 gym owners within the whole organization and underneath me to do what I did and replicate the success that we saw and my director saw, in the 10 years prior to me joining. We scaled it, we systemized everything, and we grew the company from like 7 mil in 2019 before I started to 15 million last year, which is, it's not huge, but it's pretty incredible.
Massive. That's massive. No, and what I love about that is, so many people are looking for the systemized and the consistent fix, right? When there's opportunities in the way markets change and there's opportunities in niches, they can go after and capitalize on those. Like in your case, it was, you knew the gym business was going downhill because of COVID, and it was going to be in the gutter for at least a couple of years, right? Right. And so you took advantage of that, and you had these motivated, entrepreneurial-minded people that needed the gap closed in the meantime. And so you were able to recruit a team of gym owners to sell dental laser equipment. I mean, if that's not like square peg, round hole, from outside looking in, but I feel like, and I don't want to get too into this yet because I do want to talk about some sales management stuff, but I feel like because of your talent optimization background, you were able to recognize, hey, these are the same people. these are our people that we need to go after. This is the profile, right? So going into the sales management piece, currently with your team, do you have so it's all remote management, remote team? You guys aren't meeting in person ever?
We had our very first sales summit last 2 weeks ago, actually, where we all got together with our headquarters, the founders of the company. Yeah. But that really hasn't happened for like a decade prior to us being there. So, nice. No, you're right. It's 100% remote. You're on island as both a director and as an actual 1099 consultant. Of course, there's a lot of interaction virtually, and we meet up. We have state dinners in different towns where we invite doctors, and I go and support my reps at those things. We see each other once in a while, but it's usually separately and kind of compartmentalized, right?
Right. So what are you doing to manage that team remotely? Is there a cadence you have, a weekly sales meeting? Is there a daily check-in? Can you walk us through some of those systems that you have in place?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, tools, Asana and Slack are some of the big tools that we use to manage collaboration, communication, things of that nature. Non-negotiable weekly Monday morning kickoff, no matter what, with my sales team. I love that. Just address any challenges. I mean, this organization it's kind of like bottling lightning and organized chaos, right? Like when I came in, there was no actual concrete SOPs or systems. Right. And then add in the remote piece. It makes it a lot more challenging. You can send as many emails as you want to. Doesn't mean they've read them or they've had time to really understand them or even work on them, right? So that Monday morning mandatory kickoff is huge. Not only to just cross off items that are outstanding, but also just be a sounding board and peer group for your team members to say, hey, I'm having a hard time here. What's working for you? 3 or 4 people, 5 people. So that works really well. I would never change that. And outside of that, I mean, I'm constantly talking with these guys and one girl in my team every day. I'm available to help them close, right? Whatever the case is. They call me, they have a prospect on the phone. I'm there for them no matter what. It could be 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock at night. My whole job is to support them and I try to do the best I can with that.
So most sales teams will track, units of sales, dollars, amount of sales, those top line metrics, maybe even gross revenue. But what are you guys tracking inside the business in terms of like conversion rates, dollar per sale, or what are those metrics that kind of like if you had a dashboard in front of you that you have on that dashboard and you're on top of with your team?
The big one is, believe it or not, it's not as much, 50 calls, X, Y, and Z. It is. It's a lot more, I would say, looking at the habits that will lead to success. So what are those KPIs?
So you're going back even further.
Further
than the controllable actions. Okay.
We do. And because we know those actions are going to lead to the outcomes. So the big one we look at is researching 50 new doctors. We micro target a specific geographic area. Say we'll research individually and say, who are the 50 best prospects in that little area? We'll pick, let's say it's Alpharetta, Georgia. And we'll take a little 30-mile radius clip of that, and we'll do our research from there. Pick our top 50 opportunities that, we're putting our stake in it. Who are we going to spend our time, energy, effort, and money on in order to yield the best results? So we do that on a weekly basis. And then really we're hitting research for cell phones. So using a tool called like Heartbeat AI. There's a lot of other ones out there.
Sure.
Grabbing cell phones because, email's kind of dead.
Yeah.
It's on its last legs, right?
It's automated. So like it's not dead in terms of, you can't get leads from it. It's dead in terms of the actual conversion rate of, you're going to need 1,000 emails to make one sale, right?
Right.
Yeah, 100%. No, I'm with you there. So what are y'all doing on the tech side? Are y'all texting their personal cell phones? Are these the doctors or like the gatekeepers or?
No, yeah, we go straight to the doctor. We avoid the gatekeeper at all costs. We don't even play in that realm. Good news in our space, the doctor is the decision maker, and
Right.
what we do is really beneficial, not only for the patient, because it's like, we sell the LASIK of gum surgery, right? So like taking a scalpel to your eye for better vision. Like nobody does that anymore. In dentistry, the norm, the standard of periodontal, it's the scalpel, and it's like, stitches, and it's like barbaric, right? What we do is none of that, no stitches, no scalpel. It's incredible. But the doctor also makes a lot of money with it, right? It costs $100,000, but the return on investment on this is incredible.
So you guys picked the right product. So many, I come across so many salespeople and they tell me about their product and how they're struggling to sell it and everything. And it's like, at some point, it's not about you and your systems and your talent and your skills. Sometimes you're just selling the wrong product. The wrong product still exists. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so you may need to sell something that you believe a little more in. You can hear it in their voice when they're convicted on it.
Right.
The very fact that we're talking about, scalpel versus laser and dental, means that you believe in the product that you're selling. So
it's wild. I never would have carved this little path out for myself, but here I am selling a laser in dentistry, right?
I love it. I love it though. It's one of those things. It's like you just have a barometer for it. When you hear somebody talking about a product, you're like, man, I could sell the crap out of that.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But anyways, let's go into talent optimization. So one of the biggest questions I get, and it's typically from my clients that have one salesperson or haven't hired that salesperson yet, is like, how do I find the right people? So how would you answer that question?
I would say no matter how small you are, measure twice and cut once. And it's easier to do it as you're making your first step than it is to reverse the damage you've done by making, 100 steps, right? What we do is we really take a good amount of time to define the role, behaviorally speaking, and then to do what we call a job assessment around that role. So, you take stakeholders in the role. If you have a rock star in the role that you want to clone or replicate, that's ideal. We'd use that as a benchmark. And then we take stakeholders who have visibility in that role or have some kind of stake in it, right? And we say, okay, I'm going to have you fill out what you feel this role needs individually. I'm going to take all the data that we compile for what you think the role would need or the person in the role would need to be successful. And we're going to reconcile all those differences. And then we're going to create a job target for you to hire against. And just by doing that, it forces everybody to get very clear on what the role needs, where the role is today and where it's going to go. And then you have that behavioral objective data to hire again. So it's not feelings or emotions. It's like, no, we have objective data. We've taken a lot of time to define what success is going to be in the role or who would be successful in the role. And once you add that layer of objective data, your batting average goes up instantaneously to the point of I would blindly bet on the data and the culture fit. So matching of values and believing in the mission, like that's the culture piece. But then the behavioral data, those two, I'll take that all day over experience and resume and briefcase and all of that. And if I had to blindly bet on it, I would 100% bet on the data.
I love it. So do you wait? Okay, so like you've got within the company, let's just say you've got the sales manager, right? And they want to hire their first salesperson. You've got the owner, then maybe you got some other executives in the business, right? And do you weight differently what the opinion of that role and responsibilities should be, and then the results of it? Do you weight it differently depending on who's answering those questions? Or is it like y'all come up with an even keel type method?
So you could, if you want to, with, let's say with the owner. But really the process is they're going to fill it out individually. We jump on a call or meet in person and we talk it out, right?
Okay.
And oftentimes, if you have 5 people fill it out, you're going to get 3 different directions and answers. Right. So and that's more often than not that they're not on the same page. So now imagine hiring somebody and having 3 different expectations, that person's set up to fail. You know what I mean? So it forces everyone to get on the same page. And actually that process is the actual goal, right? The job target is the result of it, but the process is getting on the same page and having an objective tool to be able to use to do it.
And that way, when they come in the company, like everybody is giving them the same answers. Like, you need to focus on this. Your results need to be X, Y, and Z. And this is where your focus needs to be, versus coming in a company. It's like, oh no, you can do some admin stuff. You can do some research over here, some prospecting. You know what I mean? Like, of course, the CFO wants to squeeze as much, revenue as they can out of you and have you handle everything. You know what I mean? But when you decide that directive before they come in and everybody has that right in front of them, like, hey, this is the scope of work essentially, and then the controllable actions and the results that we're after, and everybody's on that same page, that's exactly what you do when you build a sales program. You know what I mean? Like, that's the perfect example of that. So can you give us maybe one test case where you've done this for a client and they've had an experience through this?
Yeah, I mean, there's many different fields, right? All the way from nursing homes to grocery stores. But in a sales example, to kind of keep it here, I think the number one thing that we've seen is two scenarios. One, we talked about it a little bit. It's taking your top producer, your top individual contributor, and then making them the manager. Which, if you haven't done a behavioral job target for the manager versus, let's call it an outside sales role, you're not 100% certain that those roles, behaviorally speaking, have the same kind of needs, right? Or the same type of person that would be successful in it. So we see that a lot, where we can kind of reverse engineer and diagnose some performance problems from a sales perspective. And then, of course, all sales organizations aren't the same, and then all sales positions aren't the same. You have, hunters and basically, I call it whale hunters, right? People that have a higher tolerance for risk. They'd much more likely and much more appreciate an unlimited ceiling of earning, but they're willing to risk any kind of safety and security for that. People are either wired for that or they are not. And we can easily determine that through the assessments that we do, right? So you start to look at some of these, commission-based roles that are, let's face it, when you're in the field, you're kind of on an island. So you need a different kind of support system. You have to also be very autonomous and very independent and all of that.
Self-motivated
versus, somebody who doesn't tolerate risk as well. And maybe they like doing more repetitive things every day. They prefer a bit more safety and security. They don't care as much about the unlimited ceiling of earning. They might say, hey, I'd much rather be guaranteed $100,000 versus the opportunity to make $500,000 with no salary or no draw, right? So those two people are very different as well. Looking at like a farmer, relationship builder, cultivator versus a hunter. In sales organizations in the beginning don't often think about that, because everybody has to do everything in the beginning, right? And it makes sense, but eventually you have to start looking at, employee turnover and burning people out and saying, how much is that actually costing us, whether it's tangible or intangibles, like interviewing people, recruiting people, training, onboarding, ramping them up. And you have to look at, okay, well, how do I mitigate that? How do I minimize the turnover? How do I keep people in their positions long enough, and then make sure that they're actually wired for the role?
Now that makes a lot of sense. And honestly, those profiles that you're kind of walking through just by themselves could really help sales organizations and just business owners target their next hire. You know what I mean? Especially when it comes to sales and understanding, all right, what's your history? Are you simply, like you said, a hunter-gatherer, bringing in the business, and then somebody else manages it from there? Because that's what happens a lot, is you have that one salesperson that goes out, hunts for the business, brings it in, and then they also have that salesperson doing account management.
Yeah.
And they have them doing some fulfillment too on top of that. And like you said, burnout happens, right? So when they split those roles, understanding the personality profiles for each, and then targeting them and then hiring for them, it reminds me of solar. And, you have salespeople that will die on the sword of, I'm the setter, I'm the closer, and then I'm the account management too. And no, all you have now is a job where you can't scale, any of those positions, right? And so, what it's turned into is the setter, and all they do is bring in the leads, set the appointments, the closer goes in and closes the appointments, and then you have the project manager that manages the account from inception to turning the power on, essentially. And so, I think a business like that is set to scale, and it has 3 different profile types that it's hiring for. You know what I'm saying? One of them has nothing to do with sales and everything to do with project management, which is a whole nother profile you should be hiring for. But expecting one person to do all 3 of those things is just, it works in the beginning because you have to, right? It's like, I can't hire 3 people and support them in this role in the beginning. And it's typically the owner doing all of that, right? But, you can start hiring for that next role, which typically is the project manager, and then it's the setter, and then eventually it's the whole sales team, or the whole
you nailed it.
Sales flow, I should say.
You nailed it. And,
no, that's huge. So
you can't take your closer
predictive
out.
index, what's that?
I was going to say, you can't take your best closer out of what they do
Right.
uniquely well and throw them into a account management role, because now they're doing nothing well.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and they're not, kind of in their power of closing. And you've just handcuffed them, right?
So what does your service actually look like with the predictive index? What's the process for that? And then what does a business owner or a sales manager need to invest in order to take advantage of that?
Yeah. So I use 2 different assessments. One is the Colby, one is the predictive index.
Okay.
Little fun fact for everybody: if you Google assessments, there's over 800 out there in the market today. But only a handful are actually scientifically validated for pre-hire and selection. Predictive Index and Colby are 2 of the handful. They measure very different things, but they solve for the same problems. So in order to engage with either one, Predictive Index I kind of like because it's more of a knowledge transfer, and then it's unlimited use for the software. So let's say a company of 50 employees or so wants to engage with me to solve a turnover problem or a hiring problem. We'll talk with each other, kind of do a needs analysis, discovery call, figure out what the best approach would be. And then they ended up doing the unlimited use annual client agreement through us in Predictive Index. Let's say if we use that. And then I do a knowledge transfer training with their leadership team, whether it's the owner or if they have an executive team or something that resembles that, as well as any kind of like frontline managers. And I train them on this. I train them how to use it on a day-to-day basis, so they have access on a live basis to be able to use this to solve the problems as they're going. And then I sit on their bench, right? I'm kind of like shotgun in the car. They call me, text me, email me, however they want to get a hold of me. I make myself very available to be able to help them solve their kind of people problems or create job targets, or even just serve as a mediator to talk through some of the job targets for the process I talked about a little bit.
Gotcha. And then, so you've got the 50-person company. What about someone that's like, is this scalable down to someone that just wants to hire their first sales manager or their first sales role?
Yeah. And that's where the Colby Index comes in. It measures slightly different things, right? So Predictive Index measures motivating drives, and then the needs and behaviors that you can predict of those motivating drives. So very unique, very repeatable, measurable, repeatable. Over time, it's stable as well. Colby is also very stable over time. It's who you are, how you're hardwired. Literally, it doesn't change over time. A little more scalable because you can just do one person, whether it's an individual you're coaching or a job target for just one person. It's more per drink at that point, so way less money from an engagement standpoint. A little less scalable, but not terrible, but it still solves for the same problems. Colby measures. I'm sorry. Colby measures basically how you uniquely solve problems while striving and then free to be yourself.
Okay, very cool. So I could hire for a sales manager and then turn around and hire for like a project management person, and then turn around and and hire for this other person, and it's, you know, more of a per hire basis.
Correct.
Awesome.
Whereas the other one's unlimited use, and you know, you get as many hires as you want.
Okay, so what's next for your consulting company on the predictive index standpoint? Like, are you guys looking for certain opportunities, or is it more just scaling it slowly over time?
Yeah, from a business standpoint, for myself, we're growing. I'm a solopreneur with VA, and then I enlist other master trainers if I have like larger groups. Let's say it's of a executive team and frontline managers of 30.
Yeah.
I'll bring in somebody to help me facilitate that, just from a coverage standpoint. But I travel all over the country. I do a lot of virtual as well. So we're growing. Really, my sweet spot of companies that I help, predictive index is 50 employees all the way to 1,000, and then Colby is everything from 2 employees all the way to 50, and that's kind of how I separate, compartmentalize, and use them on that basis. I'm publishing my book, shameless plug.
Nice.
How to Succeed in Spite of Yourself. It's the ultimate guide to leadership through self-awareness. Fun story. It's not like, you know, super long, but it's all about leadership. It's all about self-awareness, and it's told through kind of like a fun story. A lot of leadership lessons embedded in that. But I'm excited for that because it really drives home a lot of what I talk about on a day-to-day basis with clients and what I've seen. But I've kind of thrown it into a story line so you can follow along and kind of resonate with it, right?
Yeah, that's the biggest challenge I'm going to have with writing my book, is I'm such a tactical, like, systems and processes dude, and that's boring. So whenever, like I was on that sales call earlier, and the guy's like, "Hey man, like, I'm going to sign up. You don't have to go through all of this." You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I'm like, I want to show you what I'm delivering to you. Like, I work hard on this, you know, like, look at my toy, you know, like, I want to show it to you.
Yeah. And it's like, you know,
but it's boring for other people, you know. They're like, I understand I need all this crap. Just send me the invoice and let's get rolling, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'll take those too, because
yeah, exactly. No, that's awesome, man. So the last question I typically ask is around legacy. You know, what does legacy mean to you, and what legacy do you want to leave behind?
That's a great question. You know, I think my legacy is going to be my children and the impact that they have and leave on the world. So I'm pouring everything into my children. I'm trying to lead by example with them, for them, give them a great, I would say, groundwork of having a relationship with God. Those are things that are very important to me. I can't control what they do as they become adults, or what happens to them either in life, but I can make them very smart, very resilient. I want to kind of teach them how to understand that, like, you know, there's this kind of like box, and that's like the game of life, right? And we got to like jump into that box to play the game, but I want them to see out. I want them to zoom out and recognize that that is just a box, and I want them to kind of live outside of that box and pop into the box when they need to. But I want to just give them a different view of everything, what success looks like, what being a good person looks like, being a good Christian looks like, all of that stuff. And then I guess beyond that, in my company, of course, I think, you know, just leading by example and helping people understand their unique strengths, and hopefully through that, creating better leaders, and then also minimizing people from having depression and burning out and kind of maybe being in the wrong seat, right? Without standing that or recognizing it. And then, of course, you mentioned land.
Yeah.
I'm looking at 10 acres of land right here in Savannah that I'm going to pull the trigger on literally, I think this week or next week.
Beautiful.
And legacy land, right? You know, we'll build our homestead on that, and then we'll have plenty of room for our daughters, if they choose to raise their families and build houses on the same land, or at a very minimum have something to them that would be valuable down the road, like the 10 acres, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then they'll have that home that they can always go to.
That's right. That's right.
Absolutely. No, I love it. I love how hyper focused you are on the kids, though. I mean, your answer was 85% your kids, right? Everything else was kind of like, yeah, my business, of course, and then, but you went right back to what you're going to leave behind for your kids from the land aspect. So, I think when we hyper focus on that, I think there's no way we can't actually win when it comes to legacy. You know what I'm saying? Versus, you know, when the answer is typically wide instead of deep, you know, it's very wide. Like I want to impact, you know, 1 million people, 2 million people, this whole deal. It become, you know, I worry about the downside of that, which is losing focus on those which are closest to you. You know what I'm saying? So love the answer. If anybody's interested in the services that you provide or just wants to follow you, you know, I know you're an intermittent fasting freaking genius, you know, so you came and talked to us about that. So you know everything there is to know about intermittent fasting, homeschooling, hiring, leadership, you know, so you're definitely somebody resourceful to follow. Where do they follow you at?
So they can follow me on Facebook, of course, direct message me whenever you want. I'm happy to give you the predictive index assessment and walk you through your results. I think that stuff is super important. And then LinkedIn, of course, you can find me on LinkedIn, expressingthegeniuswithin.com is all my business stuff if you want to look there. And of course, the book that's coming out, I will let everybody know as soon as that publishes next month, I hope at the very latest.
Fantastic. Yeah, and shoot us a link as well, or you can drop it in your podcast folder, and we'll definitely get the notes updated with that link.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Absolutely, brother. Well, thank you for coming on the show.
All right. Thanks, Doug. I appreciate you.
All right, let's get building.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Building Great Sales Teams podcast. We really do appreciate it. As you know, we believe that great leaders build great teams. How do you become a great leader? You learn from the greats. Join us at the $1 Million Mastermind put on by Ryan Stewman in Frisco, Texas, and learn everything that you need to learn to be that great leader. The link will be in the description below. As always, we ask that you like, share, and subscribe wherever you consume podcasts so you can stay up to date with the Building Great Sales Teams podcast. Let's get building.